think it was a year or so ago, I was invited to come out and talk about ServerCheck, and at that time it was pretty new. I had barely gotten started in Node.js, and luckily I wasn't able to make it back then, but luckily I'm able to make it today. So a year later I got to improve some things, and also this presentation was quite a bit improved as well. So I'm Jeff Geerling. You can find me anywhere as Geerling Guy, LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and Google. Right now I work at Mercy. I'm a senior application developer there. At Mercy we do a lot of PHP, Java, little Ruby, and I also own a side job business, Midwestern Mac LLC, and for that I do some web development, little app development for iOS and Mac OS X. And some of those projects incorporate Node.js and some other fun languages. And mostly I have that job just to do interesting and fun things that I like to do, because I like exercising my brain like that. In the Drupal community, I maintain some contributed modules, and I've been involved since 2005, working on documentation, working on some core issues here and there. And most of the jobs I've held have had either primarily or secondarily a lot of Drupal work involved. And today I want to talk a little bit about ServerCheck and a love story between Drupal and Node.js, and also touch on a little bit of how I see those two communities of developers are very similar and some very different aspects as well. And also some thoughts on hosting, marketing, and monitoring. ServerCheck is on the web. It's not a desktop application or anything like that. So I want to talk a little bit about how I do the hosting for that and my thoughts on hosting in general. And then we'll end with a little discussion, talking, and then get into hacking and having some fun tonight. And one question immediately on Hacker News, the first question I was asked when I did a Show HN post was, why are you building another uptime monitor? There's like 1,000 of them. And it's true, there's one of the biggest ones is Pingdom. There's hundreds of other ones. When I was thinking about starting ServerCheck, and before I did, I went around and looked like, is this the service I want? No. Is this the service I want? No. And really, all I wanted at that time was a really simple service that was ridiculously cheap, but not free, because I had been burned by some free services before. I'm relying on it to show me, is my server up or down, and I don't want a service that's going to be 90%. I want a service that's going to be 99.9 to 100% able to tell me that at any given moment. So this was a dog food project, even if... Oh.
Just covering up your text a little bit.
Oh. Even if I had not... Even if I hadn't opened it up to anybody else, I would still be developing it just because I need it for myself, and I didn't see any other service that offered what I wanted for less than maybe 50 to 100 bucks a year. And I figure I might as well spend a few hundred hours working on something to save 50 bucks. So, so I built ServerCheck, and it's simple, cheap, and reliable. That's the three things that I target for it. It doesn't have a whole lot of features, but it's rock solid and very cheap compared to anything else. There's a couple free services that are similar, but still cost more when you factor in SMS, which is the main thing that I use ServerCheck for. And I launched it in December 2012. As I said, I was going to come here and talk about it last year, but some life events intervened, and now I'm here this year. So a whole year to prepare this presentation.
All right, excellent.
It's going to be amazing. So I want to give a quick little demo just to show you guys what we're talking about. I'll pop over just far here, and it tells you what it is. I probably spent more time on the logo than on the text for the site. I'll log in as John Doe. So in your account, you can have 5 servers on the basic plan, 25 on the I forget what I even call the big plan. And for each server, it gives you, on your dashboard, it gives you a little sparkline graph here, the uptime for the past month. And then when you go in, it shows you more details for the latency, how long it takes for your server to respond, and on the uptime, and gives you a list of outages. A note on this is these features, I've actually built more features and then just scrapped them because it really didn't help the product. It didn't help the simplicity, and I didn't want to involve myself in maintaining things that I didn't care about. So everything you see here are things that I've actually cared enough about that I want to keep them. And I don't care what other people think because I built it for myself. But I do care a little bit, and I've added a few things here and there. But when you go into edit a server, you just give it a title and the URL you can ping. You can check for content on the page, and you can choose your interval for checks. A lot of people actually, they go to 1 minute, and they hate how a lot of hosting providers have like minute-to-minute downtime all day long. If you use some cheaper hosting providers, and you can choose your notifications, email or text. And again, when I originally built this, I had email, text, Twitter, I think Facebook back when they allowed direct messages from apps. And I had plans for more, but really people weren't asking for them, and I didn't want to maintain them. I wanted to keep the service simple. The only one I'm considering adding is HipChat and some of the other IRC and other notification channels. We'll see.
Did you say you originally had XMPP, Jabber, or?
I didn't originally, no. But that was one of the ones I was thinking about, but then I just never got around to it. That is one that actually would be helpful to me, so it might come around someday. So anyway, it's simple. There's not a whole lot more to show. The sign up, let me show you. The sign up is through Stripe. So this just integrates with Stripe, the credit card form. Pretty simple. So that's a quick little demo. There's more to show, but I'll leave that as it is now. So for the service itself, I integrate with Twilio for SMS, Stripe for payments, and Discus for comments on the blog. Some of the, like Stripe, I could do a lot of different ways, and I've used PayPal in the past a lot, but Stripe was ridiculously easy. Users like it more, and they let you integrate directly in your site as long as it's secure, a lot more easily than PayPal would, and you don't have to go through thousands of steps of business process and all that junk. And for Discus, Drupal's commenting system is not so bad, but it's bad enough that Discus was easy to throw in there and it works great.
Does Stripe still, somebody was telling me that Stripe still requires a server-side component to like do the actual billing, or you can like do everything client-side, but then you get a token and you have to like use the token to like actually...
You do have to, yeah, you store the token and then you use the token for display, for records, and then basically the way that the Stripe form works is they fill it out. When you click submit, Stripe.js takes over, sends off the request to their server, sends you back just the customer token, so it's secure, you never see a credit card.
Okay.
And then you take the token and you charge that token,
okay,
and then you can store it and do other stuff with it later.
Perfect.
So then the other couple things that it uses that aren't ad hoc custom built are Flot. It's a jQuery graphing library, which is, after looking at 5 or 6, and this one is by far and away, it kind of blew me away how easy it was to do graphing, and I hate graphing. So it was really nice. It lets you do spark lines easily. It's very lightweight, and I'm actually on like a 0.2 versions behind right now, so at some point I need to update that. And then MailChimp for email templates. It's one of those decisions, again, to keep things simple. I've done a lot of email work before, and I like, if you've ever designed for Internet Explorer 6 or 7, designing for email is like designing for Internet Explorer 2 or 3. It's bad. So I used a MailChimp email template instead because it helped me get up and running more quickly.
Are you actually hitting MailChimp's API to send the messages, or are you just using a template?
I'm using just SMTP on the server. So I've dealt with ServerCheck in the biggest days, maybe 1,000, 2,000 emails, not that much. The service I worked for before, a couple years ago, we sent hundreds of thousands of emails on an average day, so we use Amazon SES. Now, even if you're doing that many emails, if you take the time to set up your servers correctly and use DKIM and all those different standards to make your emails signed and verified and the domain trusted and everything, you can do your own email. But services like SES and MailChimp has Mandrill, I think, and there's also Mail Gun or something like that. There's some good services out there that will take care of all that for you. So I would recommend using them if you don't want to spend hours and hours researching why you get in some Gmail inboxes but not others, and some Outlook but not others. But the primary purpose of this presentation is to talk a little bit about how I see Drupal and Node.js working together, at least as far as I'm concerned. As far as you're concerned, you might think that Drupal is a horrible, terrible idea, and PHP is a stinking pile of poop, but that's for you to talk about. You don't have to tell me. So, for server checking, this was, when I started it off, I actually started building it in Node.js, and then since I wanted to start using it soon. Node.js at that time was still kind of a mishmash. It was still kind of growing. The documentation wasn't that great, and there wasn't a lot of good material online to help me get started without diving into the source and everything. So I said, forget that. I rebuilt it in Drupal, and it was really quick because basically the basic parts of the service are servers, check servers, and content that updates other content. So Drupal is great at handling content, but it's horrible. It's not horrible. It's very bad at doing things where you need to do a lot of tasks in a short amount of time. So when I originally built it, I was using Drupal's queue API, which uses a database queue, which anytime you talk to anybody that's ever had experience using queues that do a lot of data handling, you never do it in a database like MySQL. So that was problem one, but the other problem is without doing a lot of jumping through hoops, it's hard to do things in PHP that let you do things asynchronously. So with the default Drupal API, you can have a queue consumer and you can multi-thread it. So you can have like 20 queue consumers that are sitting there taking items out of this large queue and processing them and putting the results somewhere. But even with I went up to 16 threads on a small VPS to check all these servers. Even with 16 threads, it was still falling behind with 10-minute server checks, and it was hopeless with 5-minute server checks where all the servers on the site would be checked every 5 minutes. And so I thought there must be a better way, and I knew there was a better way because the little experimentation I had done in Node showed me that it was going to be a lot easier to do the server checking in there. So I switched gears from using the synchronous processing where PHP would pick up a server, check it, then put the result somewhere, then pick up another server, check it, put the result somewhere, and I went over to Node. And anybody that's touched Node or any other Go and other languages where concurrency is kind of the default, you kind of see, like, you never think of using something else when you need to consume a lot of stuff and process it quickly anymore. And in PHP, this stuff can be done. When I was working on this, the problem was that the queue would just get stacked up and then we'd never get to the end of it. In Node, since it's processing everything at once to a certain limit on the system, it would process everything, and the longest server that was checked would be the length of that queue consumption time. So if I checked 500 servers and there was a server that took 28 seconds to time out, on Node, that server, the whole process for the 1,000 servers would take 28 seconds, maybe 29 with a little overhead. On PHP, even with all the concurrent threads, 16 at a time or 20 at a time, it would take minutes. And so I could never offer per minute checks or 5-minute checks even with the number of servers I had. So, as I said, you can do it in PHP. You can use, there's a multi-curl extension, and you can figure out ways to jump through hoops and do it, but PHP wasn't built that way by default, and none of the libraries out there that exist work with it, so you kind of have to write your own stuff. It's just a lot of stress to try to do it that way. And with Node, it's simple. So because of this also, I re-architected ServerCheck, and it was using one beefy server to do everything with a bunch of threads and PHP using tons of memory. But instead, now I had a tiny Node.js application, which I'll show you, that allowed me to put that little app on a bunch of servers and gave me geographical diversity, which was another lesson I learned in the building of the service, the internet is a terrible, terrible place. Everything goes down all the time, and every route on the internet, it goes up and down. Like you could think that you have a stable connection, but really, almost every point between your computer and whatever server you're getting to changes from moment to moment, unless you're sitting there connected to one server by a LAN cable, and even then, you'd be surprised. So the other thing is that the servers, like I said, they're checked asynchronously, which is kind of Node.js's bread and butter in my opinion. I think that's its strength, and some people like using Node.js like some people use Drupal. It's the hammer that fits every nail, which is not the case. Or wait, everything is a nail when you have a hammer. And I think I've seen some people throw Node.js into situations where it's like, why are you doing this? You're jumping through callback hell for no reason at all. And it gave me a new feature on the site. I could do 1-minute checks without killing myself or making my server go down or causing delays. So the new architecture, the old architecture was there was a big beefy server with a database, and that was it. With the new architecture, my main web server, the front end that's running Drupal, is now like a 512 meg DigitalOcean VPS. It's sitting there doing almost nothing because most of the page loads are cached in. Right now I'm using a module called Boost that builds HTML pages, but I have Nginx running, and I'm going to be switching to it soon, which does that a lot easier than the way it's set up. But anyway, so I now have the small server and then a bunch of check servers. Right now I have 7, and I can add new ones within a few minutes if I ever need to. Right now the 7 are handling the capacity perfectly fine. This one represents most of them. There's another one somewhere, but anyway, there's New York and Seattle and Los Angeles, etc. So when you realize that the internet is so unreliable, it's nice to have a bunch of servers to check. That way, if one says, oh, the site's down, I can send another one off to another server somewhere else, and it can check, oh, the site's really down, and then I send the thing. A lot of the free services, especially the ones that only have one server, they'll tell you your site's down like 20 times a day when it's not really down. It's just there's one server somewhere on the planet can't see your site, but that's pretty common actually. So I don't want to annoy people with notifications, especially if it's a text message that they're paying 10 cents for, or I'm paying 7 cents for in some cases. So the main overview of how it's structured is Drupal has 2 callbacks. One just is a list of servers. Right now I have it set to a batch size of 100, so every time that Node comes up it grabs 100 servers out of Drupal. Drupal marks them, so the queue is kind of still stuck in Drupal, but that queuing system I've thought about moving to something like 0MQ, but it's not a bottleneck at this point, but I'm ready for it, so hopefully that will become a bottleneck, which means ServerCheck is doing amazing things. And then there's a callback also to accept the data back from Node once Node has checked all the servers. And in Node, it's basically a small app, pretty much a script, that grabs a list of servers from Drupal, checks them all asynchronously, and then posts them back to Drupal. And originally I had it set up to grab the list of servers and then check them, and then as each one was checked, it would send it back to Drupal. But that was not good because of many reasons. The main one being the internet, again, is an unreliable place. So I'd get a lot of situations where it would check 100 servers, and 97 of them would come back, and then 3 would be in the queue stuck, and they'd wait 3 minutes or whatever the timeout was. Then they'd be recycled, and so I just didn't want to have that delay. So batching them like this lets the full batch gets through immediately, and if it doesn't, it retries, and it's been a lot more reliable. So I want to show the code just a little bit. Let's see. So this is the main deal here, and it's been probably a month or 2 since I've done anything serious to it, so you'll have to forgive my non-familiarity with it. But basically, I'll discuss the libraries I'm using, async and request and JJG ping in a minute, but it has a configuration per server that it grabs in a separate file. and then it kicks off a request to the, let's see, the ServerCheck service callback. It grabs the list of servers here, and then it makes sure that it's getting it. If it doesn't, it logs the error. And this is interesting. I have Munin monitoring this, and the servers, even when they're not reporting themselves down, are actually not able to get the list of servers sometimes. So it's like other servers can see this server, but it can't see the central server a lot of times. Again, reinforcing the internet's a horrible place. So then I use async to loop through all the servers and check them. And then once that checking is done, it just calls a callback for the complete function, which posts them back to the Drupal side again. And then I just pulled out all these functions basically into their own little standalone function. One thing that's interesting that I've been going through with my Node experience is the callback hell. The first revision of this application, so I have, let's see, check server and server checks complete, request result callback, and ping result callback, and post results to server. So five functions here that I use in the course of this little app. And the first version was basically this request went down like 200 lines, and all of that was in one. And it's a different mindset, I think. I know some of you guys probably work that way a little more frequently, so your minds work that way a little better. But I was trapped in the callback hell of JavaScript, of Node.js actually. And it took a lot of time working and playing with it to figure out how that actually works in the real world. And then on top of that, testing it. I'm used to testing synchronous code, and where callbacks don't exist, really. And when you're testing code that kind of keeps going down that chain, it requires a little bit of mental flip-flop, I think. I don't know if anybody else has gone through that, but...
Sure. Did you ever look at promises or any other control flow mechanisms?
I have, and promises seem promising, but I haven't... There was actually an article a couple weeks ago I read that I actually kind of wrapped my mind around promises, and I'm considering someday moving to using them in this code, but I haven't had time to look at it. So
sure. The other thing you might take a look at, because it's going to be available in full soon. ECMAScript 6 will have generators and basically gives JavaScript a yield keyword, basically shallow coroutines, and it lets you. It's for dealing with exactly this kind of thing, and it's a different mechanism than promises or callbacks. I mean, it's kind of, I would call it middle ground, but you want to, I don't know what you...
Yeah, I think I'm related. I have another question, but yeah, you can finish it.
No, go ahead.
So there was this line 38, process.exit.
Yeah.
What I mean, so is this a process level integration from Drupal to Node, or what?
This is basically I don't have this mentioned, but this is running on a through cron basically. So once a minute on each server, it calls this ServerCheck.js through Node, and instead of having an application running in the background, when I did that, it's interesting. I had it running for about a month or two, and there was a slight memory leak that on these teeny tiny VPSs, they're 128 meg VPSs, they would all get full, and then the app would quit. So I said, forget that, I'm just going to run it. So it runs, and then it gets all the, it does all its work, and then if there's an error, I exit with 1, so that the little script I have that runs it will kick off something to Munin. Munin will tell me that there's a problem. And if I notice that, hey, this server has had a problem for the past hour or something, then I go look at it. But really, that hasn't been a big issue. It's usually once or twice every hour or two. But I use this more as a shell script, but in Node, basically, than a full-fledged application. Now, I'm also working on, and I didn't have time to prepare anything for this, but I'm working on a small application that will sit there and respond to ServerCheck requests. So I'll push out a request to one of these servers, and it'll respond with the the status. Because right now what I do is I send it off in another queue to another server to check it, to make sure that it's down for the double check to confirm. And I'd rather have it just push it out and get back a response from the master server. Yeah?
Is there another JavaScript file that requires this one?
No.
So why do you have, on line 28, you got your check server. Why does that get exported when you define that?
Because I'm working on moving towards making this part of that bigger app.
So something will require
yes, this is, I should say this is kind of in progress, and kind of, it's based on basically the first revision that I did, but I'm working on re-architecting the entire thing so that there can be the app, or I can run it as the script like it is right now. So I could call it as a script, it'll run and quit, or I can have it called in a separate process as a running app.
Okay. And I don't know if this was obvious, but like line 27 and 29, you could get rid of both of those and then remove the argument list from 28. It would do exactly the same thing. It would just pass exports.check server as that second argument for each.
I tried that actually, and for some reason it wasn't working. I don't remember what, when I did that, I mean, we can try it here in a few minutes, but
because of the exposure, if it was a local function, I think it might work. That's my guess.
Yeah, I mean, we can play around with it afterwards
the same
too.
With the error one, 30, 31, 32.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's try it.
Yeah, I mean that also too, remember, it was like a month ago, and so I don't remember exactly, but I do remember trying that and it didn't work, and I'm like, what the heck? So I just put it back like this, and I'm like, it works. So that's my PHP development background. It works. Ship it. Even if it's horrible.
Are you going to show us the PHP code?
Yeah, I can in just a minute, but I just wanted to show the Node stuff really quick before I get to the end here. I just wanted to cover a couple more things about the Node and hosting and stuff, and then we can get into everything. But the main things I'm using are request. It's a really nice library. Like in PHP I use Guzzle, in Node I use request, and I don't know on iOS, I still use the old Google library for making requests, but I'm sure that Apple has a better one. But it's just so full-featured and nice. Like, there's no reason to try using anything else. And then I wrote a little NPM module for pings, because there were like 8 ping modules out there, but none of them were really that well written that I could see. Like, requests was really nice. Like, the code looked nice and had tests, and it worked nice and it was fast. Some of the ping modules were ridiculous, so I just wrote my own for that, and it doesn't get many uses. I don't think there's a whole lot of people in the world that do pings. And then for asynchronous control flow, there's the async library, which is like almost every project I've ever seen in Node uses it. So, and it gives a lot of convenient methods for going through loops and processing things synchronously and everything. So
Callback wrangling.
yes, yeah. And I'm guessing some of the things, again, I for the past probably 3 or 4 months, I haven't been following too much with latest developments, but generators and traits, I'm guessing some of that will supersede some of the control flow stuff provided by async.
Well, it won't obviate any of it necessarily, but it offers another. Yeah. It's another way to think about those things.
It's more native than promises.
Yeah.
Right. More native to Node than anything else.
Yeah.
Well, and I think if you use generators, you're going to end up using promises with them.
Yeah.
To make it all work. So.
Yeah. Well, one thing I do remember when I was working on making my code work with a promises development method was, like, there were like 4 or 5 different ways that people did promises, and I was trying to, when I was confused about it, that didn't help. Like, reading 3 or 4 articles, and each one, it's like, that's not the same. So I'm guessing that it's gotten better. Like I said, that one article a couple weeks ago was really good.
And I think if you're building stuff for native Node land, I think callbacks are just going to still be the king. I mean, I like it.
Yeah, as long as the modules are staying relatively simple. I mean, if you have several thousand lines of code and it's all these different callbacks, I mean, it's, I think that that introduces a mental overhead penalty on its own. So it's really, I think, it has to do with style. And if you're gonna stick with callbacks, then you need to enforce on yourself a certain limit to how big you'll make your little pieces. So
yeah, I saw some examples where it's like 30 or 40 indentations, and it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Your brain can't handle that.
Well, you can't test that stuff independently either.
Yeah.
It's all linked together. So it does need to be broken out so you can test it and use it.
Yeah, and that one thing that attracted me to Node is in modern PHP land, things are more modular like that, where like you have many small components, and Symfony was probably the biggest champion of this in the PHP land, but you have small components that have a good architecture and work together well, and that's what I saw in NPM. Is like there's a lot of little tools that I can use, and they all work together really well, and they're fast, and they don't get in my way. Before we get back into code, I want to talk a little bit about hosting and marketing and things, because I know some of the guys here. Oh, sorry. So I know some of the guys here. You might have a small business or company, or even if you have a big company, saving a lot of money is always a good thing. ServerCheck runs mostly on low-end box servers. I don't know if you guys, who's here has heard of low-end box, the community online. Low-end box is a community where basically they have lots of cheap hosting companies, really, really cheap, like $1 to $5 a month for VPS type companies. They just post deals and talk about things, and DigitalOcean is considered a low-end box in some ways, 512 meg VPS for $5 a month. And there's no way I could use something like Amazon for the service. I would be paying more money into it than what I get out of it. It's a project that I basically wrote for myself anyway, so I don't want to be wasting a lot of money on it. So all these servers are like $1 or $2 a month, and they're all 128 meg RAM running CentOS 64-bit, so you have even less RAM overhead on that. And they just run Node. But I don't really need anything that powerful or beefy for this, because the constraint is network I/O, and I want geographical diversity. So using a lot of different providers also provides me provider diversity. Like if Amazon is completely down, then all of your services are down. I wanted something where there's a server that goes through level 3, and a server that goes through Cogent, and a server that goes through Verizon, so that I'm testing different parts of different networks too. So that's what I got from using those kind of servers. Also, infrastructure is managed with Ansible. Who here is familiar with configuration management tools like Ansible, Chef, Puppet, CF Engine? It's the one cool thing I like about Ansible is it's so simple that I actually have started using it for local development as well as all my servers, and for infrastructure management. If you ever have one server or more than one server that you have to manage, using a configuration management tool is awesome and it's best practice, but with Ansible it's also easier than doing it by hand, in my opinion. And I've liked it so much that I'm actually writing a book on it. My second life, I would say, is being an infrastructure management person, DevOps. And so I'm writing a book, Ansible for DevOps. It's 50% complete, and I invite you to check it out if you're interested in getting into Ansible.
Is Ansible, would you say it's a complete replacement for things like Puppet and Chef?
Yes, and then some. The cool thing is Ansible was written by Michael Dehan. He worked for Red Hat, and or Puppet. He worked for one of the companies that does I think he might have worked for Puppet. I don't remember. Anyway, but he's seen some of the biggest server configuration management systems and deployments in the world, and he decided to write a tool called Ansible that does everything they did, but more simply with a little bit better coherency. I don't know what's the word for that, just togetherness. And it does deployments, it does provisioning, it does management, it does everything. And it has modules built in that work with Amazon, DigitalOcean, Linode, Rackspace, pretty much every hosting provider that has an API. You can manage it through Ansible really easily and spin up any kind of Linux server. It doesn't work with Windows, at least not yet. but I'm guessing this crowd is not too much into Windows. But if you have to work with some Windows servers, sooner or later Ansible will probably be working with them too. But anyway, and I'll show you how that looks really quick in a second. But the main thing is using a bunch of different small servers and making sure everything is automated to the point where when I add a new server, I started out with like 5 or something 6 months ago before I started using Ansible, and I had just a couple scripts I'd run on the server to set them up. But even there I had to do a few manual steps, run the scripts and everything. It took maybe 30 minutes to set up a new server after I bought it. Now with Ansible, I just put the server details into my Ansible inventory file and type in Ansible playbook, and then give it my password, and then it just sits there for like 3 minutes and sets everything up. And then once I'm finished with that, if I make a change to the configuration, just run the command again and it changes it across all the servers.
And so does it do the provisioning from front to back as well? I mean, so like it's going and talking to DigitalOcean's API and all that stuff, so you're not having to log in manually and do this.
If you use just one provider like DigitalOcean, or you could use multiple providers. If you use providers that have modules for Ansible, then yes.
Okay.
And for Midwestern Mac itself, I actually have it tied in.
Nice.
So I can spin up new VMs for my testing. But if you use a multitude of them, like I have RamNode and Bluebox and all these different little providers, none of them have APIs, so I go into their interface, buy a server, and then set it up.
Gotcha.
So, but anyway, and ServerCheck for the past, year and a half or however long it's been, it's had 99.97% uptime, I think, which means, like 8 minutes a month or something, which is better, in my experience, monitoring these sites than Amazon, Bing, Yahoo, and a couple other sites. And again, you realize on the internet there's no such thing as 100%. You might get 100% for a short time, but even the biggest players are not reachable in some parts of the world sometimes. But if you have diversity, if you have different locations running your servers, I still have a weak point in that my main server is one server, but I have hot backup in case I ever need one. So far I haven't. DigitalOcean's been really good for that main server, but that's still a weak point. But for this checking, those servers go up and down all day. I get emails. I turned off the text because like some of the one in LA that's through Bluehost, it goes down like 10 times a day. It's really annoying. But I don't care because I have 7 of them, and if all 7 of them go down, I can spin a new one up using Ansible in a few minutes. So it's not a big deal. So this is just a quick demonstration of Ansible. Ansible, you can either manage servers directly, just Ansible command, and then the server name or group of servers, and then the options, like what to do, and whether to do 8 at a time, or 12 at a time, or 200 at a time, depending on your bandwidth on your computer. You can asynchronously manage your servers too. And then when you fire off a command, it just runs the playbook on those servers. And I'm not going to play the whole thing, but this is the Node.js server that it's deploying here. Configures NTP and IP tables for the firewall, and then eventually it gets down to deploying the Node.js app. And then if I'm running it again, like in this case, it will pull down the latest code from my Git server onto that server, and then it'll make sure that the app is quit and restarted. And the other cool thing this enables is if there's 2 servers or 3 servers having a problem, I just run this and it gets it back into a fresh state again. So not a big deal. I don't care if I have little issues like that. Again, it's my PHP mentality. It works. I don't care,
Has your work on, or how is this question? The work you've done with ServerCheck, has that directly informed how you're explaining Ansible in your Ansible book? In other words,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's one reason why I do things like ServerCheck. It's not the most amazing server checking service. It works. It's worked for a year and a half, and I love it because it does everything I want it to. But it's been basically the main vehicle for my work on Ansible for DevOps, because I get to deal with a bunch of different providers and a bunch of different. I've even gotten to try, like, I can switch from Ubuntu to CentOS to Arch Linux and different things just to test like which one deals with the 128 megabyte limitation better. And I can do it through Vagrant, or I can do it live on a server, or I can do it through DigitalOcean. And there's a lot of things that it enables. You can see at the end it gives you a summary of what happened. So also, like, sometimes if I notice servers are changing, it shouldn't be changing because I never log into these servers. That's one thing at my DrupalCon presentation on Ansible in a couple weeks. I will be mentioning that in 10 years, it's the same thing. You never go onto prod and change code. In 10 years, we'll be saying, you never log into a prod server. What do you think? And Ansible is one of the reasons why that's going to happen. But anyway, when I see something change, it's like, what's causing that to change? And why only on these two servers? So I can also see, like, it's kind of a health check for me. The servers are running fine, but something changed. Apparently something in Munin changed. So another couple quick notes on the launch and marketing. I think, who here has ever started a small little online software as a service or product or little app or anything? So a few guys. And when you launch it, you probably think to yourself, especially since it's like, I love this thing, it's so great. You probably think that it's so cool that people are just going to flock to it. And you lie to yourself, but that's completely wrong, unfortunately. And you realize that the second day when you have 0 signups or maybe 1. So a few tips on that, some things that I've done. One thing that was really helpful is I built the site in Drupal originally, so I marketed it kind of towards Drupal people and highlighted how it uses Drupal and used my small voice in that community to kind of promote it. And within the first day, I think I got 8 or 9 Drupal people to sign up for it. And it was cheap enough that they would just pop over and be like, I'll support this guy. So use your community. If you're in this community, you know, tell the other guys here, you guys should check this thing out. Also, a Hacker News post. I studied the times that would be best for posting on Hacker News. I was reading up on the different analyses of times of the day, days of the week, and types of stories that get popular. And I got lucky with getting a show HN post on the front page for about 8 hours.
Wow.
And that took down the server for a while because I was running Apache with Keep Alive set to 15, and Apache, the way I had it configured, only accepted like 300 connections, and the 300 connections were constantly in use. And on top of that, the bandwidth on that old server was saturated, so I couldn't log in via SSH and change the settings. So I had to keep logging in until I finally could get back in. I should have just used the console through DigitalOcean, but anyway. But it was good. It was, I got a lot of traffic that day, a lot of good feedback. You know, it's another community that I have a very tiny voice in it, but if you can use that community to your aid, you know, a few people signed up, but I got a lot of really good feedback about, like, why is this way, or if you did this, I would sign up. So a couple of those things were stupid, but a couple of them I did, and more people signed up. Hey. Also, sponsoring blogs in the tech world. I know I am addicted to my feeds, and I read them religiously every day. And there are certain bloggers who I respect, and I know that they only accept advertisements from companies that they don't see as stupid or cheesy or marketing-y. So if you know of a blog in your area that does sponsored posts, that's a good way to generate a little buzz quickly, get some traffic. And finally, blogging. The ServerCheck blog, I mostly talk about Ansible, a little bit about Node, a little bit about this kind of stuff, marketing and things. And it's generated probably 20 or 30 signups just through the blog post. People tell me they found this cool blog post and they didn't have any good monitoring in place or something. So,
have you tried Reddit programming?
What is that?
Have you tried Reddit /
Reddit is a fun community. They love just trashing everything that's not the trendiest and latest. Anytime I've ever done anything in PHP is anything tangentially related. I mean, Hacker News is similar, but a little more respectful. But it seems to get downvoted immediately. So
it's a different set of crowd, you know,
yes,
compared
yeah.
to Hacker News.
So on Reddit, I've found that targeting smaller communities like the Ansible community and sorry, I need a little water. But the smaller communities seem to give more return. Got something in my throat.
Rebrand that as PHP app rewritten in Node case study.
There you go. With a little Go on top and some Clojure script. My voice is gone. But anyway, so another thing that was really helpful is I made sure I had a lot of the metrics that I needed to care about. I don't remember when this was from. Probably a few weeks ago or something, but and you really can't see it at all, that stinks, but someday we'll get a super big HD projector in here. But anyway, I had the statistics I needed. Like, one of the things was, early on while I was developing it, I had a problem with some servers were doing almost all the checks, and I was like, what is going on? I was like, all these servers are checking, it should be kind of random. Then I realized I had them all checking on the 0 second of every minute with no jitter, and all of them were synchronized via NTP, so they're all within a millisecond or two. So whatever server, I think the main server was in New York, and the server that was closest to it was in Seattle, or not Seattle, it's one of the Carolinas. Anyway, something on the East Coast, it's like, why is that server getting like 300,000 checks every day? And these other ones are getting like 800. It was because that one was like 8 milliseconds closer than the next server. So I added some jitter into it, and that helped me fix the standard deviation of how many servers are getting checks, the distribution. And I also want to keep tabs on how many SMS messages I'm sending, because Twilio charges variable rates for different countries. Interestingly, I have more clients in Saudi Arabia than any other non-US country. I have no idea why, but their text costs 7 cents per message, whereas US it costs 1 cent. So I keep track of that, make sure that I keep a lid on it. There's a high limit on the SMSs. If you're getting more than like 300 messages per month, you probably have other issues to worry about besides your SMS limit being hit. Just other statistics that I cared about and were helpful to make me realize, like, do I need to work on this or that? Are the servers doing fine? Like, at this point, the server checking component is humming along, so I'm focusing a little bit more on adding a couple little features, focusing on what's bringing people in, that kind of stuff. So, additionally, Munin has been helpful to see, am I going to need to upgrade to 256 meg VPSs, or can I keep on the cheap $1 a month 128 meg? And for all the servers, for the main server and for all my servers through Midwestern Mac, I have them all set up through Munin to give me emails when resource limits are being reached, so I know when to upgrade the disk space or whatever. So make sure you monitor that. And a quick summary. Basically, and this is me speaking, this is not gospel, but to me it's gospel, so I don't really care about what you think, but Drupal is a really good platform, especially if you guys have any interest. I don't know if anybody does any PHP work or any CMF work. Drupal 8 is a really amazing platform for applications where you have users and content, basically, and that's most of what ServerCheck is. So it's a perfect fit for it. I didn't want to have to spend a lot of time coding up all the back-end work of it, so Drupal gives me content and users out of the box exactly how I need them. I just needed to tie in a few things. And then Node is, in my opinion, very good, like perfect for lightweight asynchronous work with I/O or with web-based stuff, anything over the internet. Now, I wrote this presentation also a few months ago. I think Node has grown quite a bit, and I would consider using it for more projects nowadays than I used to. I still don't think it's to the point where there's applications like Drupal built on it that I would want to recommend it to other people necessarily, but for myself, I've considered reworking some things in Node that I wouldn't have 6 months ago, because the community has continued to stabilize and grow, and because bigger companies are starting to use it to the point where it's an essential fabric of kind of how things are developed online. I don't know if you guys know, but like Walmart is using it for a lot of their stuff. They switched to Node before Black Friday, or during Black Friday, or something like that. And Node handled the load really well. I mean, a lot of times it's because of their architecture also changing, but it handles well large applications. PayPal also, even though I hate them so much, they actually their new interfaces are actually faster and sleeker, and it seems like their services are getting better, but sadly I don't know if they'll ever change their APIs to be friendly. But if they do, it'll probably be partly because they're using Node and enabling a little faster development backend and everything. And the main principle, like for me, I've always worked with nonprofits or with very low profit startups. So budget has always been a huge concern for me. And like for Midwestern Mac, it's a side business. It doesn't generate a lot of revenue for me at all, but it's more for fun. And so I want to do a lot with a little. So when I started out with ServerCheck and I had a budget of 0, and I still have a budget of 0, but luckily it makes enough to pay for all my hosting for all Midwestern Mac's different services. And that's nice. It's nice to have a project that continues to sustain itself. And even if I didn't make any money, I'd still be running it just for myself, so I don't care, again. But anyway, that's all I have. We can talk about the code a little more, too. I mean, heck, if you guys want to improve it and make it even more amazing, that would be great. But I have some resources out there, too. For Ansible, I have like 15 different environments set up in a GitHub repo where you can just load it through Vagrant and run like a LAMP or LEMP server or a Node.js server with using Forever to run an application, Ruby and anything else. And it also gives you a quick introduction to how Ansible works. And if you ever have done, like who here develops locally using virtual machines? Okay, so a few of you guys. If you ever start doing that with a tool like Ansible and with a tool like Vagrant, you start seeing how powerful and flexible it is and how much it can make your work, especially moving from your local development to production, quicker and without as much pain. Especially like in the Drupal world with LAMP, you have Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, and that could change from Nginx to Apache, and you could run different flavors of PHP. One of the big problems that everybody seems to have is it works on my computer, So I would say it's worth your effort looking into using Ansible or one of the other configuration management tools to make sure that you can use the same configuration on your local computer that you're using on your production servers. And I know with my current employer, Mercy, we have little issues all the time where we have a configuration file that's out of sync on production versus one of our 17 other environments that we work on versus all the 17 environments that the workers work on. So if you can figure out a way to get it all together in one configuration, it helps.
Now, is that in a particular repo on your GitHub account, or where is that?
Yeah, if you go to github.com/GeerlingGuy, it's /Ansible-Vagrant-examples.
Oh,
is one of
them.
And then the other one I have linked here, and I'll be posting the slides up somewhere, and I guess you can link to them. There's a Node.js dev VM that's inside of my Ansible for DevOps book repository. And that is, as I said, 50% complete, so there's going to be a whole lot more coming. And I'm excited about it. I think Ansible is one of the few tools that I've used that it's like, it really just gels with the way that I work. And I can see it changing a lot of situations for people that have a lot of servers to manage.
So I see you've got a bunch of these Ansible roles. Is that you can mix and match those on a server? Or?
Yeah, so the Ansible roles are, Ansible has modules, which are little components to manage things. So it has like a component or a module for managing DigitalOcean droplets and different kinds of providers. It also has modules for like managing cron. So instead of having to use a script to add a cron tab entry or something, you just say like cron hour 0, and then everything else defaults to asterisk, and then the command to run, that kind of thing. The cool thing about Ansible is it configures it the first time, it ensures the configuration is the same the second time, and it'll update the configuration in the future. And it's all task-based, and it all works. I've never had an issue with it. It's flawless in the way that it handles everything. And a role is like an encapsulation of a set of configuration. Or you can also use, like a role would be how you deploy something. You have a role that copies an Apache configuration file, restarts some service, and then takes, or before it, like takes it out of your load balancer. Then it does those things. Then it downloads the latest thing from wherever, and then it restarts the thing, and then it puts it back into your load balancer. That could be a role, and you share that role across different servers or different configurations. And it makes your server configuration flexible. And a lot of the roles that I have are basically like a role per application. So a role for Apache and a role for Ruby and things. So you can configure each thing and have one role and just a few variables you have to set for different kinds of servers you have.
I took some notes here and I had a couple of questions for you. So how do you account for false positives? I think once it's gone to the screensaver, we might have to get Mike to sorry about that. But do you, or how do you account for false positives in your downtime? In other words, if one of your server check-in servers, its network is having a problem, you know, do you have an algorithm somewhere, or is there essential mechanism that says, okay, I can't trust this guy's report of machines being down because he himself was.
Yeah. That is still in Drupal, and I can show you the code if we get back.
Hey Mike, how do we get? It went to the slideshow.
Oh, this just disconnected. I can reconnect here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he just needs to reconnect.
Okay.
No, it should not connect to Apple TV. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay.
So let me. Okay, so in the Drupal world, I have four. There are four. Oh, I have the thing closed. There. So there's four modules for the Drupal site that have some PHP in them. One is billing, just as the Stripe integration. Check servers just is the management for the check servers through Drupal. And actually, one thing I'm also going to do at some point soon is make it so that I can add servers through Drupal. So on Drupal, I just fill out a form, give it a server name and location. It'll spin up the server, put the access token on the server, and do everything through Ansible. The hard thing with that is I'm doubly concerned about security. So I'm taking a lot more time to make sure everything is tested, and I'm not going to open myself up to any problems. And then Notify does the Twilio and email work. But the ServerCheck module has, and this, I have to warn you that this was probably from a year or two ago, so I'm not familiar at all with what I'm doing in here. And this is Drupal 7, so if you're worried that we have a file that has like 800 lines, that's kind of standard in Drupal 7. Not the same way in Drupal 8, and this will be cleaned up when I word it. But where's the? I think the first 500 lines are just boring Drupal things, and then.
Does any of this need to not be on the video?
No, I have all my access tokens. Shouldn't be in here, are they?
Did you see something? I'll review that. I won't throw that blindly.
Let me make sure.
So,
yeah, everything should be in configuration files. So this should be fine. I mean, if somebody finds a security problem, then please tell me about it.
Yeah, but that's what I was thinking.
No. And if I do, the other thing is like almost all the code I've ever written for Drupal, I've put on Drupal.org or put somewhere. So and another thing about it is like for the infrastructure that I can spin it back up in a few minutes, and I have a live backup, and then I have two offsite backups, one to a live server and one to other stuff. So in a way, it'd be great, I think, if somebody hacked me and found something. Try not to do it here, but if somebody did, I wouldn't be too disappointed, because it means that I can figure out what they did and then grow from it as a developer. Now, if I were running a service that was like Pingdom, I think I'd care a little more, but you know, whatever. But I do not remember where. So I think I had. I don't even remember where I had it.
Well, even if you can't find it, just conceptually, the idea is
Yeah.
you're feeding back reports to the central guy who can
Yeah,
arbitrate and figure
so
out.
basically, and I went through a few revisions of this because I kept running into the same problem that you're describing, where you get false positives. And what I have is somewhere in the PHP. After we get back a bad response, it takes that and it sends it off to one server, and I was working on doing it for 2 servers for extra security, but one server seems to be working fine for now. I'd still like to do 2 servers, and I will once I get that extra Node.js app done. It sends it back off to another server in the queue again, and then that server checks it. So now I have 2, and it makes sure that it's not the same server picking that one up. And then when it gets that data back, if the server's already marked as down, and then the server confirms that it's down, it'll send the notification. But if the server's down and it's not, if the server's down the first time it won't, the second time it will, and then future times it just ignores it until it's back up again. And that's another thing that that's one feature I want, is every hour, you can configure every hour, every day, send you another notification if it's still down. Like for me, some of the servers, I don't care if they're down for a day or 2. But for other ones, if it's down for a minute, I care. And then for an hour, it's like, oh my gosh. Sometimes, you miss the vibration on your hip. So yeah, it always checks twice before it'll send it. So technically, you're getting 1.5 to 2 minute checks, not 1 minute checks. But if you got 1 minute checks for real, you end up getting a lot of text messages or emails.
Sure. In your original system, you talked about how you kept getting behind. And I was wondering if you did any sort of research there or sleuthing around trying to figure out where the overhead was getting introduced. And my guess was that if you're going out to curl, were you using curl as a library, or were you actually spawning curl processes?
I was using curl itself through PHP. So it uses whatever the PHP curl extension is.
Okay.
Which I think is using C
API.
Yeah, and so it was, the curl stuff itself was fast enough.
Okay.
But the checks themselves were the slow part. And I could have thrown a larger server that ran like 40 threads at it, but each thread with the way it was set up through Drupal was loading all the code for Drupal.
Oh, right.
So each thread was like 20 megabytes or something. So
you're just loading all of Drupal over and over and over again.
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah. And it's not a whole lot of overhead in some ways, but really, this way, each of the Node.js processes is like a megabyte or 2 megabytes or something. So in the future, I could still use these small servers and have like 15 checks going on at once. But at that point, I need to scale up the other server, which right now can handle, I think I calculated it out, currently I could handle about 1 million checks per hour or something like that, and right now I'm not doing that per day, so I don't carry that.
Sure.
And it's grown organically. Another thing that I was concerned about is I have this great service, again, hubris. I have this awesome service, it's so cheap and it does SMS and everything. All these people are going to sign up, and I even put a limit originally of 500 users, and I haven't hit that limit yet. So, you have to have high expectations, but don't be too deflated when you find out that you only had like 2 signups the day you launch.
Now, you talked about geodiversity with respect to your client base. You've got customers that are in other countries. Mm-hmm. But with your actual ServerCheck servers, do you have any geodiversity there, or are all of them in the US?
I have 2 in the Netherlands, and I had 2 in Japan, but those got too expensive because the provider had like a deal going on that month. So I'm still looking. There's a couple providers that have some in Australia, Japan, and Britain, and a couple other places. So as time goes on, whenever I see a deal, I pop one in, but after 6 months or a year, whenever the deal pops out, I just take that server out again. So I'd like to have a little more because, but on the flip side too, 90% of the clients I have are US-based sites that are very geographically tight. So it's like if they're in New York, they only serve New York clients. Who really cares about Japan's access to your site?
Sure. Yeah.
So it goes both ways.
Did you ever look at Redis as an alternative for your queue as opposed to using Redis?
I did, very briefly. I didn't think about it that much, but when I was looking at queuing systems, I was I was looking at building it, actually, Go was like really, really brand new in I mean, it was around, but it was, in terms of usage, it was really, really new in 2012. And it was new enough, kind of like Node was new enough in terms of the large application that I didn't want to spend time learning without much good documentation. It was good, but
Sure.
so I was going to use Go instead of Node.js, and I was thinking about using ZeroMQ, RabbitMQ, or Rabbit, I don't know. Yeah. And then either Redis or MongoDB or something else for a faster queuing system. But the way that it is now, it's just kind of like a batch queue, is working fine, and who knows, I might switch.
Yeah, no, I was just curious.
Yeah, Redis is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of Redis fans in this room.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I've never actually used it on a project. I've had projects where it is used, but I've never been developing for it, so
It's
I'm
wonderful.
new to it, and I've only heard good stuff about it, except for some people try to using it like a relational database, I think. Is that possible? I think.
It's not what it is.
No, I know, but I think I've seen people do that, and then it's like, what? It's kind of like people that use Node.js to do something like process images. It's like, wait, like, JavaScript is not good for processing images. There's other libraries for that. So,
Yeah.
My last question was, when you started out having your Node.js process as a long-running service, and you said it was leaking memory, were you able to track that down at all and figure out, was it a Node problem, was it a problem in your code, or what was the nature of the leak?
at that point, I didn't care enough to figure it out. So, but I was slightly vindicated later when I read Walmart and found a memory leak that this might have been related. Probably not, because mine was quite a bit larger. And it could have also been like, I think I started when it was like 0.10.0 or 0.9. It was an earlier version of Node, I think. What is it now? I don't even, again, I've been out.
0 to the 20.
Yeah, getting ready to do 12, but it's 10.28 or something.
Yeah, so, and I think the current version is running on 10.16 or 18 or something. But when I started, there might have been some other thing too, so I didn't investigate it at the time. It was more like, this fixes it, it works.
Yeah, no, that was just, I thought that was pretty interesting, your choice to use it as a cron batch job as opposed to having a long-running process dealing with asynchronous events. I mean, you're still leveraging the asynchronicity of it,
but not in the way that a lot of Node, real Node work would do it.
But I think it's, I mean, I think the utility of it there, though, is still pretty high. The fact that you're able to say, hey, I can spin this up and just, it probably runs in what, just a couple seconds?
It takes 2 to 10 seconds. I think the timeout is 25 seconds.
Yeah.
So if there's a few servers that are unreachable, it'll take that long.
And the startup time is probably a fraction of a second.
It takes about 90 milliseconds, I think. So it's like when I'm doing my testing, that's the other cool thing about Node, and some PHP projects are similar. When I'm doing testing, it's like I make a change, test done, make a change, test done. And I have Node unit, and I actually broke all the tests that I had and did a very bad TDD no of changing a lot of the code without changing the tests and fixing them. So I have a lot of broken tests right now. But it was like I would make the changes, and I had it running every second. It would do the tests, and it just works so fast. That's another big advantage of developing in a lightweight language, I think, like Node or PHP or something that doesn't need compiling.
There should still be some warm-up time for optimal performance, so you probably would get maximum throughput if you start needing that by having it as a longer running process. So that's why you could probably accumulate your results into something like Redis, so that you can, separate from that process, be working with that batch to send out notifications in whatever way you want, and decouple that from actually processing your queue.
Yeah, that does. It sounds really good, and another thing about this is that I was kind of experimenting with Node, and that was as good as my mind could do back then. I think now I think a little differently in terms of Node, and I didn't think of Node as like running a web service or something in the background. I thought of it more as a scripting language, which it's not, and now I realize that. But that, I think if I'm going to be rebuilding the Drupal side of it, probably at the end of this year. Drupal 8 is almost released, and Drupal 8 has made me excited about Drupal again. I was kind of depressed for a while because Drupal 7 just it had a lot of promise, and then it kind of faded out. And it's good. It's a good CMS, but it wasn't exciting. Drupal 8 is a lot better. The architecture, it's object-oriented code now instead of all kind of procedural, but kind of a mishmash of everything. But it was all procedural, but there was like fake objects thrown in here and there to really throw you off. But anyway, so when I redo that, that might be something worth exploring.
But it's a really cool demonstration, and the way it is written, because it is an excellent way to do that kind of scripting and setting up a cron job. And you don't see many presentations using it in that way. So it's cool to see that.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's a nice end run around the problem that you had, but you're able to still make, make great use of it. How many cores are typically on these servers that you're running, these cheap loan servers? Like 1 core or 2?
They're all 1 core, and so running two Node threads, or I've never even done multi-thread with Node. Can you run like?
Well, it doesn't have threads, but you could, if you had more than 1 core, you could bind a Node process to 1 core and the other, and get more bang for your buck. But with 1 core,
and even there, it's like still the by far the biggest resource contention was network I/O. So with this, at least with this app, when I start doing the other little thing to respond to server information requests,
sure.
With that, I'm going to try to get it down to like a millisecond or 2. That would be awesome. It still have network I/O problems, but the overhead of the getting the request and sending it back out, I see good things there in my testing. I haven't gotten it finished. And
sure.
I wish actually, when I saw that this was coming up and got the reminder, I'm like, I should get back into that, but life takes over.
So if each of these are running as a server, they could potentially be eating their own dog food, and with each of the batch of health checks, they could be checking each other.
Yeah, and then, I'm excited because I was thinking like the architecture can be a lot better. I like the way it is right now. It's simple and it works, but right now that the master server is a large, it is the linchpin that could bring it down. That's all the downtime is because of that 1 server, and but so far, it's one of those things where it works fine right now, and again, it works for me. That's all I care about. So really, I want, if I want to start learning Redis, which I'd like to use Redis on my own sometime, that's a good way to do it, and that's the value of ServerCheck. And for me, it's not the revenue is nice that it pays for my other hosting bills, but it's really, I learned Ansible because of it, and I learned Node because of it.
It's like a big lab.
Yeah. I think everybody should have a couple projects like that in their back pocket just to play around with. And heck, if ever I add the magic feature that makes people really want to sign up for it, which I probably won't, because Pingdom with a free account, you can also do real user monitoring and all these other amazing tools. And it has 3,000 kinds of checks and integrations. I'm not going to compete with that, but I don't care because this does what I want.
Hey, it's a big world, and there's room for more than one guy. So.
Well, and another cool thing is there's, with ServerCheck, and me looking at it, if somebody else had built it, I wouldn't care at all about it. I'd think, what a stupid thing. Kind of like some of these other check services that are free. But there's people who, they've never had any kind of monitoring for their servers. Like somebody with a small blog or something, but they earn enough income from their blog that it being down will lose them $500 in a day or something. Well, probably not a day, like in a month. And I've heard some people that use it. It's like, hey, your service is awesome. It's so easy to get started on it. And I found out that this host that I was using, they're down for 30 minutes a night. And they switched to somebody new, and they're a better host. By the way, almost all the shared hosts that I've ever monitored, HostGator and Bluehost and some of the other ones, they're down so much. I used to tell people, like, for a cheap host, go ahead and use these people because they're cheap and they should work. You know, you can one-click install WordPress. It's like they're down so much and they're so slow that it's like, forget it. But,
so what's the Twitter size pitch for what distinguishes ServerCheck?
ServerCheck-in is cheap and reliable. If you want to know when your server's down, ServerCheck won't tell you. And it uses SMS. I guess I should probably leave with the SMS part because that was the reason I built it, basically. All the other services, it's like, it's free, but you pay 20 cents per SMS, or it's free, but you pay 10 cents, or it's $5 a month, which is, what's 5 times 12, like 60 or... So $60 a year plus 5 cents per SMS. And it's like, this is ridiculous. I want something to tell me, is my server down, and text it to me, because I like having a special ringtone and a special vibration pattern, so I don't think it's my wife or something, but I know, well, my wife's not a good example because I always care when she calls me. But I know it's not like some friend or something texting me, like I can ignore it. It's like if I feel the 3 vibrations, I know my server's down. So a lot of the services charge you enough money that it, $15 a year covers all the SMSs you get from the service. Plus it, sends a nice pretty email. But yeah, SMS, reliable, cheap. That's my pitch.
Awesome.
And 20% off. Where's that? 20% off, it's even cheaper. There you go. STL 14.
All right.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, and if you do the larger plan, that's even more money that you're saving. So you pay $50 a year, but 20% off of that is like 40 something, 42, 40, whatever it is. Awesome.
Jeff, I'm curious, did you, when you switched from doing the cron with Drupal to Node, did you do that after you had launched?
Oh yeah. Because when I launched, I'm a fan of, you have something out there that works, you release it. I'm not an agile, I'm not an agility nut. What do you call it when somebody's so passionate about it? Like I like having no real process for my own projects and getting something done and then releasing it out there and then improving it and releasing it. Server check-in was done, and I was like, I knew I had that problem, and I was originally going to set it up with 5-minute checks for everyone. And then, but I said, I have it working, it's 10 minutes, it doesn't work that well, I want to fix it, but I still want to release it. Because I had spent like probably 80 or 90 hours on the project, and then another few hours on the logo and marketing little stuff. So I did the Hacker News post, that was my launch for it, soft launch. And immediately everybody's like, 10-minute checks, this is horrible. And I'm like, okay, maybe that needs to be fixed. But, yeah. So it was probably a month or so later. It was immediately after I launched, that's when, because I already knew I had the problem, and I was thinking about how am I going to fix it. So I was thinking about using Go or using Node.js, or one option was to just beef up the server, but when I saw I only had like 3 clients the next day, I was like, maybe I don't have the money to beef this server up. Maybe I need to figure out a better way. And so for the first couple months I had the Node thing working. It was only one other server, and then the server it was on, the Node app was running on both of those. But then I moved to more and more servers, and I keep a ratio of, because I want to make enough profit to pay for my hosting. I keep a ratio of like 50% profit to the amount of servers I have. So as I get another couple of clients, I get another server. So I don't remember what. I think I grade out the amount of clients I have. It's like 100 or so. It's not amazing, but again, it's enough to support the service and my hosting.
That's good. That's great. Any other questions? Jeff, thank you very much. That was a fantastic presentation.